This is Dave Lumk, your Prairie Monk, WEFC, Sam Payne, 90.1 on your FM dial.
And Dave on the board. Whoops, don't forget me. Gotta get me. This is Sunday, August the 26th, 2018. This is the Prairie Monk program, WEFT's weekly look at rails, trails, greenways, conservation, ecology, and whatever Dave has on his mind. Plus, this week, talking about Illinois' 200th birthday.
Yes, so we have Braden Belcher here, who's a director, and we will catch up with him later. Just a little bit first, we're going to go to a little bit of field work where we were dealing with cicadas, prairie cicadas, which are reasonably rare. There are 4 different varieties of them, but they make nice sounds. So David's going to, he's worked at getting this on the computer. Yep. The males are loud and the females are not. That's probably enough to let people know. There we go. You got, yes, sometimes they're louder than others. Yes, Ron Sleater was with me. We were looking for seed, and he was so proud of himself. He caught a male and a female, and he's going to take them to Iowa, where he has a plot of prairie, and he'll let them loose and hope that they will increase the biodiversity of his prairie. So that was kind of fun. We looked at the interurban. And the interurban runs parallel to the little old road, which is Old 45, and it was alive with button liatris, and just wonderful. It's a bed that has been obsoleted many years ago, but the prairie has opted to take over the ballast, and it's just rather wonderful. And right there was a thistle. And people don't really enjoy thistles, so they don't know always the difference between a Canadian thistle and a native thistle. But the native thistle was there, and we will show you on video some of the butterflies and creatures that are there. It's very interesting that the space of having 9 acres of ground plus a road and a interurban and next to a mainline railroad gives us enough space that the insects and creatures get to express themselves very well. We were a little late on the Golden Alexander. We should have been there a little earlier, and later I went to Route 10. David had reminded me that it was probably time to pick New Jersey tea, and sure enough it was. I picked about a pound of same. And I was sad to find that the off-road vehicles had been working at it, and they had about a mile of trails on our land, and so that takes out a bunch of our seed that we distribute. I took some salvage items to the Idea store. They were dunce's caps, and they were rather interesting. They distribute art materials and the income benefits to schools. The Poor's Construction Company across the road is opening soon. We have a pile of cardboard outside from their efforts. Students are back, so things are going to change in the next few weeks, and we'll have students around and perhaps some interns and whatnot from the university. Now, let's look at the Illinois 200th birthday. And first, let me introduce Brendan Belcher and just say a few words about the museum and let people know your voice.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm Braden Belcher. I am the Associate Director of the Champaign County History Museum in the historic Cattle Bank building on the corner of First and University in downtown Champaign.
You're Associate Director?
Yes.
So are the board members directors?
Yes, so we have our the president of the board, and then we have our board officers, and they're in charge for a lot of aspects of running the museum, and I manage the day-to-day and help plan events and do outreach.
And you've been there about a year?
That's correct, yep.
And T.J. Blakeman is president?
That's correct. He is the president of the board.
And he's been taking a lot of field trips around town associated with the Taste of Champaign?
Yes. Last week during the Taste, we had our walking tours, which are always very popular, our historic walking tours.
I followed him around with his camera.
Yes.
And made a record and given him the results. So he has a booklet that's open. You can see what he's talking about and for buildings that aren't there any longer. So you have a state situation where the state was inaugurated in Kaskaskia. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, so today is actually Constitution Day. So today is the 200th anniversary of when the Illinois Constitution was adopted. So it's a special event in our state's history. So we are celebrating that event today from 1 to 5 at the museum. The first 200 visitors to the museum will receive a free piece of Eli's cheesecake. And again, that is in honor of the 200th anniversary of the Constitution, which was adopted on this day in Kaskaskia, which was the capital at the time.
So was Kaskaskia in action before they did an inauguration?
Well, so Illinois was not yet a state, so that was one of the few towns of any size in the territory. So everyone congregated there to have the first constitutional convention, and that's where it was drafted and adopted on August 26, 1818.
I think it's an interesting place because I think the river has moved.
Yes, exactly.
So you don't have a Kaskaskia anymore.
Yep.
And part of the territory is in another state.
Yes, exactly.
So yes, if you go down there, there's some interesting history.
Yeah, over time, the population centers in the state have slowly moved north. So at the time, most of the population was concentrated in the southernmost third of what we now call Illinois.
Yes. So probably French coming up the river.
Originally, yep, most of it was.
And people coming down from Canada from
exactly.
the north. Pierre Marquette, is that the one that comes
yes.
from the north?
Mm-hmm.
So then you have some local history. You have a cattle bank, which is probably is it the first commercial building in the county or just in the city?
Well, it's the oldest existing commercial building in Champaign County. So it was built in 1856.
Oh, okay. Before the Civil War.
Exactly.
And,
yep.
And it had the Harris family was a dealer of cattle.
Yes. So Benjamin F. Harris was connected to the bank for a period of time. It was called the Cattle Bank because at the time in the 1850s, cattle ranching was the main industry in Champaign County. So when they opened the bank shortly after the railroad came through, they named it the Cattle Bank, again, just after the main industry in the county. And of course, Benjamin F. Harris was known as a cattle baron in the community. He came to the county from the East Coast in 1835 and started purchasing land and started raising herds of cattle, which of course made him a phenomenal amount of money.
Yes, and some of that money went back towards Chicago, which was a fort at that time, I think.
Yes, wasn't very large at the time, so obviously that changed.
There are stories about horses being spooked out by people who would like to rob the rider of the money that he had on board.
Yes, well, during that time when Benjamin F. Harris first came here, he did have some of his cattle stolen by local thieves. I guess it's easier to steal a cow than to raise your own herd, so
it was also easy to steal the cash.
Yes.
And so that's why perhaps the bank. Mm-hmm. We had a historical society. I don't know when it was formed. It's abandoned now, but
correct.
It was very early on. And it went for a long time. Do you know anything more about it?
So the Champaign County Historical Society sadly no longer exists, but the Champaign County History Museum and the Champaign County Historical Archives have continued the work of the Historical Society, and so these two groups, the archives and the museum, while they're not officially affiliated, we do work together, again, to collect and preserve our county's history. But you're right, the Historical Society no longer exists.
There were various innovations of the Historical Society. There was a spin-off, a historical museum on University Avenue that some of you will remember. And there was an Urbana-Free Library, is still an Urbana-Free Library.
Yes.
It was headed by a woman named Nell Carpenter, and she did a lot of collecting of information.
Yes.
Probably way beyond her jurisdiction, but it happened, and it's made Urbana rather famous for doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, first I would say that the museum on East University, that was actually us. So our first home was in the Wilbur Mansion. So the History Museum was founded in 1972, and the Wilbur Mansion on East University in Champaign was our first home. Since the late 90s, we've been at the Cattle Bank. We did move. But yeah, the archives and a lot of the same people who founded the museum were very active in the archives at the Urbana Free Library as well.
There was also a Heritage Foundation that was put together by Pat Miller and Bud Baker, and that did a lot of research and communication with people within the state about historical situations. They could go to a site and assess it and suggest that certain museum pieces could be in different places, and they would teach at universities and other places.
Yeah, and well, Pat Miller was also our longtime director of the History Museum. She did a lot of great work and was very involved in the community.
Mm-hmm. Then you have some state history that we should relate to, because there's a huge cheesecake in Springfield operating today.
Yes, that is true.
And all around the state. So just tell us a little bit about the Land of Lincoln Library, and I'm thinking State Historical Society, which used to be in the basement of the old Capitol.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then the Lincoln Memorial is there, the Lincoln Tomb is there.
Yes.
So just remind people that they have a state.
Yes, Springfield. If you've never been to Springfield, highly recommend it. There's the wonderful museum there. Obviously, the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library is there. As you mentioned, there are other sites throughout the state that are also celebrating Constitution Day today. We are one of 7 sites, historical sites, that are serving cheesecake. So people in East Central Illinois are fortunate to be close to
any
a site
of them within our range of 50 miles?
Well, I think probably just us at the cattle bank. So if you're if you're in the
okay.
area, stop on by. But yeah, Springfield, there's a lot of really great historical sites there.
Yeah.
We today at the History Museum at the cattle bank have a temporary exhibit on the state constitutional convention, which took place in 1970. And we are focusing on Henry I. Green, who was a local attorney, and he was actually the area's delegate to the Constitutional Convention in 1970. So you can come on by and learn a little bit about that Constitutional
Yes.
Convention and also learn about Henry Green.
Mr. Green was a very tall man.
Yes.
and very prominent in this community. So then there's a national level that we deal with history. Lincoln especially was connected to the Civil War.
Yes.
And we have an Allerton Park. And Allerton was gathering up food for the Union Army. And he was able to buy land in Iowa and Illinois and other places. And so we have some of that national history right on our doorstep.
We do, yeah. We were obviously Champaign County and this area of East Central Illinois. There wasn't much here in 1818. During the Civil War, Champaign County specifically was much smaller, but there were obviously men who went off to serve and fight for the Union. And obviously Abraham Lincoln came through the area many times. So that's another important piece of sort of national history that we like to talk about.
Yes. And it really was one of the problems of Champaign County was that it was very wet. It was very flat. It was mostly outwashed plains with 5 rivers starting off from little moraines.
Yes, and actually this area of Illinois was the last region to be settled, again, because the land wasn't that great for farming at the time.
Yes, that's why livestock rather than row crops. Row crops really didn't make it into until the 19th century. It was corn, and then later with soybeans. There were lots of activities associated with the Civil War, including some underground railroad situations. One I'm thinking of is at Villa Grove, where people from the south would be channeled through to the north and perhaps to Canada. We had rivers where people came up the river or down the river. We had canals which came across from New York, and we came over the mountains with all sorts of locks, and then came through to Illinois and across to the Quad Cities. So we had that sort of situation.
And that was also important in helping create land that could be used for farming. The first settlers that came here, the first thing they had to do obviously was drain the land because it was far too wet to be used for farmland. So they found ways to drain the land into the Saline Branch, for example, and into the Wabash River and help make this area drier for farming.
Yes. But then you had railroads came almost before the canals got into action.
Yes.
The railroads came in. So some people came here as families on the train for the first time.
Exactly.
And there was a lot of history, Champaign especially, where there was land given to Illinois Central to put in a railroad.
The railroad is very important, especially in Champaign County's history. This was a very, before the railroad came through in 1854, this was a very quiet, sort of rural part of the state. But then once the railroad was completed, there was a boom. And that's the whole reason that the city of Champaign exists today was because of the railroad.
Yes, and Champaign tends to be a more commercial town because of that also.
Exactly. Urbana may have been founded first, but once the railroad came through and Champaign was founded, the city of Champaign grew much faster.
Then the roads came, and they basically followed the railroads.
Yes, exactly.
And so you have mostly roads adjacent to railroads throughout the county. Now, let's say something about the cattle bank. Where is it? and there's 4 parking lots there, and I don't know that people know about that. So
Yes. So the Champaign County History Museum is located on the corner of First and University in Champaign, just in downtown Champaign. We do have museum parking on site. There's also metered lots around. So we encourage people to stop by and come check us out.
it's been a kind of awkward territory. It's old town, and so it is not quite so inviting as it could be. So you have to have a little tolerance and know that you're in a district that has been the mainstay of Champaign until it moved west of the railroad line.
We are a quick walk from downtown, but you're correct. The neighborhood is undergoing some redevelopment at the moment. But again, we're a quick walk from downtown, and we encourage people to stop on by.
So tell us something about the style of the museum. The
Sure.
museums are very different. Some of them are very documented, so you almost need to read the museum. Some are much more interpretive.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us something about the museum itself and encourage people to come and see.
Sure. So we have 4 exhibits currently. All of our exhibits are temporary, so we rotate them out about once a year. So if you've been to the museum before and you've already seen our exhibits, don't worry, we'll have something new relatively soon. So they all of our exhibits focus on different aspects of county history. We have currently an exhibit on student life at the University of Illinois, which was in honor of the U of I sesquicentennial, which they celebrated this past year. We also have an exhibit on World War II and on the men who went overseas to serve, and also the home front experience as well. So there's a lot of really interesting exhibits. We collect objects, again, that are connected to local history, that show what life was like in Champaign County throughout our history. So a lot of objects, but also, like you mentioned, a lot of great interpretation where we kind of talk about different aspects of history and how our community has changed over the years.
I'm not sure whether you were here at the time, but when you don't have enough room in the museum, you go to the MTD building, and there was a very big exhibit.
Yes,
in
that was for the city of Champaign was having an anniversary celebration. The Cattle Bank is a pretty small building, which is another reason that we rotate out our exhibits, just to make sure that we can display all of the artifacts we have, because we have a lot of artifacts, over 11,000 artifacts.
And you have a warehouse on Mattis.
We do, yep. We have an off-site storage facility where that collection is housed permanently, and then, like I said, we about once a year we switch out new exhibits again, just to give every artifact a chance to be on display.
You're in that neighborhood, so we're near to detention pond just around the corner.
Yes.
And we're near to Habitat for Humanity, and you have some second-hand stores. There's an armory, which is a Tiffany era building.
Yes.
It could be a ballroom too.
It's a beautiful. The armory is a beautiful building. The architecture is very beautiful.
So how can you say something about the relationship to the area, just a specific area?
Yeah, well, the Cattle Bank building has been a part of that neighborhood, obviously, throughout all of Champaign's history. Again, the Cattle Bank would have been the first building in that area, and so throughout the years, as that neighborhood has developed, the uses of the Cattle Bank building have changed. It was actually only a bank for 5 years before it went bankrupt in 1861, but it was always used throughout its history. It was law offices for many years. It was, as many local residents remember, it was Heimlicher's, which was a drugstore.
Yes.
Many people remember Heimlicher's. So it's always been a kind of an important building in that neighborhood, and we're glad that we are still able to preserve the building and put it to good use.
Well, part of your history is the prairie. So we have a prairie that used to be a pocket prairie across the road here, which we've moved to the 2nd Street dig,
Yes.
the detention pond. And so in his tours, T.J. Blakeman does mention the Prairie, and so you need to see a Prairie because
Yes.
most people haven't seen the Prairie for 6 generations.
Exactly. And when the railroad came through in 1854, all that was there was just wide open prairie. There was nothing else there. But that changed quickly once the railroad was completed and buildings grew up pretty quickly.
And later, when in the 1920s, like 1928, 30, the railroad got to be a problem because there were cars started
Yes.
to arrive. So then the attempt was to move the railroad nearer to the Cattleback, to the east, and raise it up
Yes.
using
Yep.
dirt from or glacial till from Marine and Paxton.
Yes.
So now you have 6 or so underpasses
Yes.
that
Yep.
allow not only the cars and trucks to go under, but also the interurban.
Yes, exactly. Yep, that was in
trains.
1924. The city of Champaign constructed what they called at the time the subway. So essentially, it was a raised platform for the train station, and also so the cars would go underneath, and there was a station underneath for the interurban. So if you were on the Illinois Central Railroad coming into town, you could hop off your train at the train station, walk down a flight of stairs, and get on the interurban, which would take you really anywhere in Central
I think
Illinois.
the flight of stairs is still there, and it's boxed over.
Yes,
You
yeah, they
can't-
don't let you use
You
it
don't
anymore.
have access
Yep.
to it. So.
Dave, paused for a second. Is that the flight of stairs that's actually like attached to the train tracks as they go
think
over?
so.
Oh, good, right on the patio of
You could walk down
whatever
into
establishment
the
is that
interurban.
Masner? You used to be able to walk up those stairs.
Yes.
And also I think there'd be various animals that would actually transit. And I've seen concerts where the animals came and enjoyed concerts
Oh,
with
wow.
the rest of it. Yeah, that was a few years ago. Back to you, Dave.
So, you're responsible for bringing together volunteers, and you have volunteers.
Exactly.
Can you say something about
Yeah.
your volunteers?
So the Champaign County History Museum is completely run by volunteers. I'm the only staff member there, so we really appreciate all the community members who have, so graciously donated their time to come help. So we're always looking for new volunteers. If people are interested in local history, if people want to get involved, we're always looking for people to come in and help us out.
Okay. You have historic families. You have early reports that are sort of from a distance. You had artists that made a picture of a family farm and the family progenitors, and so you have an association with families that have been in Champaign County for a long time.
Yeah, we do, and we have a lot of support from people in the community. We're completely membership supported, so those families and those people in the community are very important to helping us do what we do.
Yes. Your style involves media and art and interpretation.
Yes.
And so it gives you an idea of the style of the museum. So do you have artists that work with you?
We don't have any artists that work with us. Our exhibits, we create them all in-house, so we design them and we put them all together. So, if there are any artists out there who would like to, do some design with exhibits, we would, love to have your help. But yeah, we create all of that in-house, and but again, we're always looking for extra help if anyone has the skills.
You have a children's room that allows kids to do some of their own things.
Exactly. So we have a little station in one of our exhibit rooms that is meant for children. They can get their hands on some artifacts. Usually museums don't let you touch artifacts, but we have a few in our teaching collection that we let people touch, and they can kind of guess what they are, because some of them are kind of hard to identify, kind of weird looking older things. So kids can come in and they can help us identify them. They can kind of put on their their museum docent hat and get some hands-on experience with that
Do you
as well.
connect with the Orpheum Theatre where David works with? David might say something about. Is there a connection between the two of you?
We love the Orpheum,
and
we would love
vice
to-
versa. You want to take a break? I wasn't actually going to bring this up, but I've actually met him before because of the EMP program. We shouldn't probably spend much time because you've got to scoot at some point.
EMP.
But this is how I know him, is from running into him a couple of the Emerging Museum.
It's the Champaign-Urbana Emerging Museum Professionals Group. That is where I met you. But the History Museum, we love the Orpheum, and we'd love to partner more in the future with them and to have programs that are geared toward children.
Well, you have other associates too, and I have a list of some of them. One is the Urbana Free Library,
Yes.
where you can pull pictures. We were watching a bar across the road. Just pulled a picture of the cars that used to
Yes.
occupy this bar many years ago,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
it will be up there shortly. There's PACA, the Preservation and Conservation Organization.
Yes.
That will find older materials that if you have to repair the building or do things, and they have a sensitivity to older equipment.
Yes, yeah, and their main goal is to help preserve local history. So we love them, and they do great work for sure.
You have a Spurlock Museum, which is not too far away, which has some of the same elements and invites in the lectures every once in a while.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you have an archaeology department, which goes digs.
Yes.
And have you been on a dig?
I've never been on a dig, but I would love to. I've always thought archaeology was so fascinating. I don't think I'd be very good at it, but I think it's very, very interesting.
We had a dig locally. We moved a Greek revival cottage onto Leal Park.
Oh, yeah.
And it was on an old Busey cemetery that
Yes.
was closed.
Yep.
And we dug up a grave. And so there were 2 Indians buried there.
Yes, yep.
And so you can't, it's federal offense to be digging up an Indian grave. So there had to be an official archaeological
Yeah.
dig. And the participant had a shroud, and it was obviously not Indian. So
Yeah, well, that Leal Park in Urbana has a fascinating history because it was known as the Old Urbana Cemetery, and it was actually the first cemetery in Urbana. So some of the first settlers in Urbana were buried there. Also, like you mentioned, some Native Americans were buried there. So, and there's a little gazebo in Leal Park that kind of commemorates those people who were settled there, who were buried there.
It was kind of fun that the building was about to be exterminated by the university expansion
Yes.
for a huge library, and so it was trundled down. The historic museum at the time had a lot to do with this.
Yeah, we were very involved in getting that building moved.
And it was thought that it could perhaps go to the Park District, but the house was not strong enough that you could have a walker in the front room and not fall through the floor.
Yeah.
So that didn't happen. But then the Urbana Park District had taken the Leal Park, and so we got a building mover.
Yes.
Trundled down Springfield, up Wright Street, and then up University Avenue to
Yeah, and actually the Champaign County Historical Archives at the Urbana Free Library has some really fascinating pictures of that move, and there's pictures of it on University, slowly going down the street near Carl Hospital. So we're really glad that building, is still there,
And the reason why the graves were being dug up was you put a foundation around for the building to be sat upon, and then you dig out the basement.
Exactly.
We wanted a basement so that there would be room for artifacts.
Yes.
And that building is now the Park District headquarters for Urbana.
Yes.
And Urbana Park District was quite involved. And then we've mentioned that we have had a heritage foundation which has taught, and Bud Baker and Pat Miller and a whole bunch of other people have been involved with that. You do field trips. The Taste of Champagne field trip?
So those are historical walking tours that we do during the Taste of Champagne. They're very popular. We have. In the past, we've only done them once a year, but we're hoping to kind of grow that program because, again, people really love those walking tours. So this past week at the Taste of Champagne, we did a historical walking tour of downtown Champagne and then also one on vice and crime in the Prohibition era. We're hoping to also start a series of historical downtown Urbana walking tours as well. So if you're interested, you can keep checking back with us to see when we launch
on
those.
Market Street, you actually had some interesting things happening.
Exactly,
In
yeah.
Prohibition era, you had a stairwell, and right up the top there's a little window.
Yes.
You could check out on the person that was coming in. There are places where there are bullet holes.
Yes.
That,
It's a very fascinating history.
and even on First Street, where you're located,
Yes.
there was action, quite a lot of action. So you have a speakers bureau. That's a bit formal for it. But you can go give speeches to schools or other places if they need.
So our education committee runs a monthly speaker series program. So once a month on the second Thursday of the month, we have a speaker come and give a talk in the Cattle Bank in our community room. So those are open to the public. Again, the subject always varies, but it has something to do with Champaign County history.
You have to advertise those things.
Oh, we do. We do most of our advertising on Facebook, Twitter, things like
Yes,
that.
yes.
Also, if you go to our website, champaigncountyhistory.org, you can find all the information about the speaker series. Those also are streamed live online, and then we also post those videos on our website. So if you're not actually able to physically come to the museum to see those, you can watch them on Facebook or go to our website later and watch them as well.
I like that you put a few flags out and a few stands outside so people get the notion
Yes.
that they could come look and see. You take donations, and donations are pretty hard to deal with. They might have been in somebody's basement or in somebody's attic, and it's not a good place.
Exactly.
Say something about donations and what you can do.
Yeah, so we do actively accept donations of artifacts. People pretty regularly bring in something that they have had in their family for a long time, or maybe a relative who passed away had something and they donated to us. We limit it to objects that have to do with Champaign County history. So if you have something that has something to do with local history, we'd be more than happy to accept that as a donation. We like to know some kind of background information about where it came from, maybe who owned it. But we do accept donations. People have mailed us artifacts from all over the country. So yeah, and again, that's how we grow our collection, is just through things that people donate.
Sometimes when you're aware and you're walking around watching things, you can notice that a building that was older might just have some archives in it. I'm thinking of Gleesman Studios, which was sort of open for a while. And then we let probably the historians know, and eventually they came, and so there were people who saved local history. The photographer had worked with Western, and so there was some national history, but there was also a slug of university history. So they took a truckload of artifacts out of there.
Yes.
Before they were distributed sort of loosely around the neighborhood.
Yeah, and we always say that if you have something that you think you might want to throw away, it's always good to check with your local museum or archives just to see if they want it before you toss it. Because once something is thrown away, it might be one of a kind, you might never find it again. So any type of records, we always encourage people to take those to the archives at the Urbana Free Library, because the museum just deals with objects.
Yes, I just took a bunch of music legal documents where not-for-profit organizations have a hard time doing their accounting and their legal documents and things. So there's always a concern about that. But I picked up a bunch of things that I thought were archival, and I took them to the Urbana Free Library. They said no, but try Sousa Library. So music and I've signed documents that has been saved, and it could have gone to the landfill.
Exactly.
You don't make appraisals.
We do not.
So let's make sure about that. and you don't get too political. You're neutral. So you don't get involved with the school district and where the school should be. Now that's not always the case, but it's the case here, and it's not always easy to run non-profit agency, West included, and our own Heartland Pathways. This is tough stuff. So I appreciate your being here and doing that sort of thing. So let's look at training. Tell us how you're not native here, but tell us a little bit about your background, how you got your training, and then suggest how students might get their training.
Yeah. So I have, my background is in history. I have my bachelor's degree in history and my master's in history. And
where are you from?
so I'm originally from Michigan. So I'm not, I did for a period of time grow up in Kankakee. So my father's family is from Peoria, the Peoria area.
Oh,
so we do have some roots.
They're both interesting places.
Exactly. So we do have some roots in Illinois, but I primarily grew up in Michigan, and then I went to college in Indiana, and then I went to grad school in Florida. And in grad school, I specifically focused on museum studies because I knew I wanted to work in a museum. So I'm really glad that now I get to. It's a great experience.
So you have a curriculum in history that
Yes.
allows you to do this. And you have places like Spurlock Museum also that you can
Yes.
get some internship there.
Yeah. So for any students who want to work in museums, I always encourage them to just start volunteering. That's a great way to make connections
Yes.
and also gain some experience.
And then they might just be an intern.
Exactly. Yes.
So
we
you
always
have interns.
The History Museum is always looking for interns. We love to get as much help as possible.
So unfortunately, it's really hard to keep museums afloat. So I've got a list here of historical museums that are lost out. One was a museum on University Avenue, which was there for quite some time. Then there's an air museum in Rantoul. It was the Air Force Base, and it's lost out. And then there's a nickel plate railroad depot in Paxton, which was Paxton's also historical records, and that's closed out. And our own Natural History Museum, we got a Spurlock Museum, but we didn't get a formal Natural History Museum, so parts of it has gone to the Natural History Survey. But tough territory, folks.
Well, thankfully, though, the Historical Museum on University in Champaign didn't close. We just moved because it's still us. It's the Champaign County History Museum. We just moved our location, but we stayed open.
There's a lot of you don't have a huge ballroom and a
Yes, that's
beautiful
true. That is true.
floor.
Yep.
And, yes, but there are some successful ones. So the Monticello Railroad Museum is one. The Vermilion County Conservation District, or the Historical Museum in Danville works pretty well. Bloomington is an older town than Champaign, and it has quite a bit of.
Yes, they have a great the McLean County History Museum. It's a very great museum.
Yes. Then the Urbana Free Library keeps coming in there.
Yes.
Uncle Voss as
At the archives, yep.
at
They
the
do great
archives.
work.
She said, "Bring it. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yep.
Just bring it because we'll save it." But they're not going to be ridiculous. They're not in the game of restoring your booklets or things like that.
They don't restore it, but if anything that you would like to donate, they would accept it.
Yes,
Yep.
they'll take a good look at it. And then we have a Forest Preserve Museum, which is on the applied side, but it's very healthy.
Yeah, well, the Champaign County Forest Preserve, they operate the Museum of the Grand Prairie, which is the museum in Mahomet. So that's a great museum. They do a lot of great work. So there are, as you just mentioned, there are a lot of great museums in the area. So they always need help and support. So I always encourage people to go out and visit their local museum.
So we've got 5 minutes left. 10 minutes left. Think of things that you might want to repeat. including today's cake.
Sure. Exactly. Free cheesecake at the Champaign County History Museum between 1 and 5. So we encourage people to come out. Again, that is in celebration of the 200th anniversary of the Illinois Constitution. So we'll be open until 5. We encourage people to come out today. We have just expanded our hours of operation. So we are now open 5 days a week. So we're open Wednesday through Sunday. So we always encourage people to come out and visit us. Like I said, we have some great exhibits. And if you've already been to the museum before, you can come back because there's always something new that we're doing. So we have temporary exhibits, and we're always kind of switching those out.
So can you handle a school bus with 60 kids on it?
We've done it before, but it's a little tricky because we are, the Cattle Bank it's a pretty small building. Again, built in 1856. They built things smaller back then.
When a bus goes to a field situation, can you take a few more?
I think the most students we've ever had at one time was about 30. And that was, we were packed full. So
it has to be realistic. There's a vacant lot right next to you. Is there any thought that you might expand to the east?
Who knows? I mean, that would be great. Because we will, we do the best we can with the space we have for now.
It depends on the support.
Exactly, yeah. I'm not quite sure who owns that, but...
Do you have a website?
We do, of course. ChampaignCountyHistory.org.
David's got up on the computer at the moment.
So, we encourage people to go there. You can check up on our events that we're having, upcoming events that we're having. You can watch our speaker series from our website. You can also sign up for our e-newsletter, which is a great way to stay updated on the different things that we're doing in the community. You can also see the different types of exhibits that we have. You can see that on our website as well. And also, if you're looking for...
So there's teasers on your...
Exactly, yep. They're just teasers. They'll give you a little taste, and then you'll have to come in to see the rest. But also, if anyone out there is interested in volunteering, all the information on how to volunteer is on the website as well. I definitely encourage people to go to the website. Also, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just to mention a couple really, really exciting events that we're having coming up in the next few months. On September 7th, we will be in Urbana for the Urbana First Friday event. We will be having a pop-up museum. So we will be bringing some exhibits that we've created, and we will have our popcorn wagon there. And that will be in the Cohen Building in downtown Urbana, which is on the corner of Main Street and Race Street.
A very nice building. It's just sold fairly recently. It's opposite the kitty corner from a Busey Bank.
Yes, that's correct. Yep. So
and it has a downstairs space that's enough for you to fit a few people.
Exactly. So we definitely encourage people to come out for that. Like I said, we'll have some special exhibits on display. We will have our popcorn wagon. So if you've never seen our vintage popcorn wagon, I definitely encourage you to come out and get some popcorn.
I used to drive it.
Yeah, and it still drives.
When it had a steam engine in it to drive the popcorn.
Yeah.
And you stood with your legs across the container of the steam, and you hoped it didn't blow up on you. And there's a big argument about whether it should be converted to an electrical popcorn.
Well, it's
machine.
Still in action, so we'll be bringing that out. And also in November, we will be having a team trivia night, which will also be hosted at the Cohen Building. So if anyone out there is interested in historical trivia, you're free to come out, and we'll have games and prizes, and that'll be a really fun event.
Urbana has some history for the Busey family and others.
Absolutely, yeah.
That is a little different from Champaign. Just actually wandering around the cemetery will give you an idea of some of the history.
Yeah. Urbana has fascinating history, and like I mentioned earlier, it's actually older than Champaign. So Champaign might be larger, but Urbana was the original town that was founded in Champaign County in 1833. So there's lots of history there. It's really an interesting place for sure.
And I think that Packer at one stage ran a cemetery visit where the grave for a certain person was announced. The person's buried, maybe standing there dressed in kind, and they'd tell you what their history was.
Well, those events still go on. So I actually think coming up this next fall, there will be another cemetery walk. So there was a cemetery walk last fall, and that was co-sponsored by the U of I and also the archives at the Urbana Free Library. But they have people dress up and talk about the person's life. But yeah, those events do happen, and we always post those on our social media. So if anyone is interested in taking part in a cemetery walk, those do come up periodically. So you can follow us and find out more information about that too.
Well, we very much appreciate you coming by.
Thank you for having me.
And having a twinkle in your eye to see that this sort of stuff goes on.
Yes.
And we hope that the energy transmits to a whole bunch of others. And we would hope that that little nest on the corner of First Street will gather history for a long, long time.
Yeah.
One of the problems is to take it to the next generation.
Yes.
And that's always difficult because the transmission is difficult. I want to say a little bit about Heartland Pathways needs.
3 minutes.
3 minutes, okay. I went to Route 10 last night to check the seed. David had reminded me that it was probably time to pick New Jersey tea, and indeed it's ripe and falling. And so, if anyone can help to harvest seed, it falls quickly. And it's very valuable seed. It's a plant that is not easy to grow in a row and pick seed from. It's one that you have to find a native place, and we have that on our railroad bed. And it's easy to recognize the seed, and we would really enjoy having some volunteers. So call 351-1911 or David Monk 0@gmail.com, and that would be very helpful. We may have to move a little of the remaining pocket prairie, and that's another situation where I can use some help. Again, 351-1911 or 840-1911. And thinking of phone numbers, you should give your phone number for the Historical Museum.
That is on our website. I'm bad at remembering numbers.
Okay. And you brought a link.
I did, yes.
And a link is what we're working with the Urbana Public Television.
Okay.
And they can this program is videotaped and goes up on Urbana Public Television, Channel 6. And we can put a note on the film that says there's a link.
Yes.
And we'll try to do that. So, and I think that's probably near to we've got 1 minute. So it's nice weather. If you want to see Button Leatris, go to Rantoul, to the Poke Prairie, and look at the interurban. And we have transmitted some of that seed from that same location across the old Route 45 onto what used to be a borrow pit. A borrow pit is a gravel pit, and we're establishing some of that plant on the borrow pit, which more or less like going back 10,000 years and trying to replant a site and speeding the process up. So this is Dave Monk, your Prairie Monk, WAFT Champaign 90.1 on your FM dial.
And Dave on the board. Sorry to cut in there. And I'll just give a quick plug. The phone number for the Champaign County History Museum is 217-356-1010. The address 102 East University Avenue. So if you head over there, you can, if you're one of the first 200 people, you can have a free slice of Eli's cheesecake. And let's see.
Thank Braden Belcher
Mention
for being here and telling us more about the museum.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
And the website again is champainecountyhistory.org. And they, along with the Orpheum Children's Museum and several others, are part of the Champaign County Museums, which is the name of the website, champainecountymuseums.org. So all part of that same network. I should also mention the views and opinions expressed are solely those of the speakers and no one else.